We are live, Prabhu.
Yes. Mataji, yeah, can you give me?
Yes, I'm giving you the co-host.
Okay, thank you. Okay. This is Ashyra Madhav Das. I will be speaking on Dhyan Yoga today. This is the 6th chapter in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, written by Srila Prabhupada. And before that, I will chant some auspicious mantras called Mangalacharan prayers, so that we get the blessings from our previous acharyas. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vande Aham Sri Guru Sri Utapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in chapter 6 is actually a continuation of chapter 5. So we'll go to chapter 5 and read few verses from chapter 5 to set the background on why Lord Krishna is talking about, Ashtanga Yoga. Dhyan Yoga is one of the angas of Ashtanga Yoga. Why is he talking about that? We'll also go through Arjuna's counter questions and then the final conclusion, which is the last verse of this chapter. How can a Krishna conscious devotee, or how is a Krishna conscious devotee actually practicing the end goal of Ashtanga Yoga? So we'll discuss that also, the last verse. So we'll be going through the verses of chapter 6, but before that we'll just set the background by going through few verses of the translated versions of chapter 5. So in chapter 5, Lord Krishna is answering the question. So Arjuna asks a question in the beginning that which is right? I mean, renouncing or devotional service, that is, karma yoga. Which is renouncing the activities or devotion, which is right? And then Lord Krishna says both are good, but then the devotional service is better because one has to ultimately maintain the body, and if someone is not really renouncing the activities, is not going to produce much result. And then he goes on talk about how the Sankhya Yoga, the path of Sankhya Yoga and the path of Bhakti Yoga, okay, they ultimately lead to the same results. And then he goes on talking about in the 5th chapter how ultimately in that path one actually, when it comes to a stage of Brahman, then he sees everything, everywhere he sees super soul in every living entity. And he sees them equally in the sense that they all have, super soul in their heart, and depending on their current condition, super soul is directing them to do activities as per their nature. And he is at peace. And then he goes on saying that an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So he tries to stay away from, although he engages in activities which seems to be material activity, but he stays away from the sense gratification. He engages with the material world as much as is required to maintain the body and soul together. So, but before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. He's actually talking about he being in, the Brahma Bhuta stage. But for that, one has to tolerate the urges of material senses and check the force of desire and anger. That person, his happiness is within, he active and rejoices within. So all that you see, Lord Krishna is telling, is happening within that person. And such person, his aim is inward, isn't actually the perfect mystic. He sort of kind of lays the groundwork for what he is going to speak in the 6th chapter, Dhyan Yoga. Okay. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Now, if you want to do welfare for others, first you have to know that what is that good? What is that real welfare? Because the humanity had been trying to solve the material problems for millennia, but could they? No. There are problems, small problems at the life of individual living entity, and there are large like national problems or humanity level problems. And then the solutions come, they solve it for some time, some other problems comes up, right? It is never solved. One problem is solved, other problem comes up, right? So one has to, when a self-realized soul sees that in the whole world is ultimately working to burn up the karma of the living beings from their past life, that is the main purpose why it is working, so that the living beings can then, when the karma is burned, the sins are, they're free from all the sins, then they can see how the super soul is acting, and then they will be at peace. There will be no infighting, there will be no outfighting, right? Because everyone will know why the other person or the other living entity is acting the way they are acting, because everyone is under the control of super soul. They will see that and everything will be peaceful. So one has to first realize that fact within himself, and then if he gives it to other living entities, that whatever condition they are, if they accept this fact, then they will be peaceful. Then although those activities which result in suffering will still happen in the lives of those living beings, because the karma is getting burnt up, right, from many millions of lifetimes, but they will be peaceful because they will accept that fact. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. So these are some of the qualities to achieve liberation in the Supreme in the very near future, right? One has to be free from anger, one has to be free from material desires, not desires, but material desires. Okay? You can have good desires, spiritual desires to serve Krishna, that's fine. Material desires, okay, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, right? So that's why you will see a self-realized soul like Yudhishthira Maharaj, right? When he and Duryodhan, just take an example, right? When Dronacharya asked both of them, find someone who is better than you, right? And Duryodhan goes and finds that everyone is worse than me, right? Because he looks at them materially, he's a prince, right? And everyone in the country is lower than him, basically. They are serving the king and as a result, the prince. So everyone is lower. He looks at things materially. But Yudhishthira, when he goes throughout the kingdom, he looks at them spiritually, that how, even though they are acting externally, materially, how within they all have good qualities, right? So they're very humble. And they, because, and he says that I find everyone is better than me. It is a such a contradictory perception of the reality from between Yudhishthira Maharaj and Duryodhana, right? So they always try to be more and more perfect. So they're always endeavoring for perfection. They always know they are the lowest of the lower, and then they always try to be more and more perfect. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So in this translation of the verse, Lord Krishna is much more explicit, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils. These are clearly Ashtanga yoga, right? So a normal person, when he's driving or he's working on his programming code, he's not expected to do this. He's expected to focus on the screen and do the coding, not like, concentrating between the two eyebrows and controlling the inward and outward breath, right? He's explicitly focusing on Ashtanga yoga now, sort of laying the foundation for the next chapter. But why is Krishna saying all that thing in the next chapter? When Arjuna questions him, there is a question which Arjuna puts once Lord Krishna describes through the dhyan, goes through the dhyan yoga, you will know like why Lord Krishna is saying all this to Arjuna. Of course, Lord Krishna doesn't want Arjuna to sit in the middle of the battlefield and start, doing yoga, right? But there is a reason why he's saying that, and we'll understand when we go there. And a person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries, right? So when a person is in this state, is always in this state, means which state? Free from desire, fear, and anger. All his mind, senses, everything is under control. Then he ultimately realizes that Lord Krishna's super soul is the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices, right? So that's the why it's an Adi Yagya, right? He says that I think it is in most probably it's in 8th or 7th chapter, he says, right? He is the one who receives the benefit of all sacrifices as the super soul in the heart of living beings. And he is supreme lord of all planets and demigods. He's controlling everything, basically the whole universe through the demigods. And he is the primary benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. Once he realizes this fact, he then understands that everything is going as it should be. There is nothing, this is the knowledge I need to then go and distribute to others. Okay. Don't be in denial, accept that fact. That will give you the real peace of mind. Okay. So that is the knowledge then he distributes to the whole world. Okay. So this is the foundation, and now we will go to the 6th chapter. We'll read the sloka and the translation. And I will try to also stop at, as I understand, some of the logical breakpoints, and we'll ask some feedbacks, opinions, comments from you folks. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karotiya Sa Sannyasi Cha Yogi Cha Na Niragnir Na Chakriya. Anashrita karma phalam means without taking ashraya of karma phalam. So karma phalam, if you take from modern example, right? Karma phala is the wealth we have in as in bank balance, the relationships, right? We develop, we gather. Then all the insurances we take shelter of, basically through that money we buy, right? So one has not to take the ashraya of that karma phala. Okay, so that is the first step of starting in the process of Dhyan Yoga. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as is obligated. That doesn't mean that you should not work. You should work as you are obligated, as per your duty. If you are a householder, then do the duty of householder. If you are a sannyasi, do the duty of a sannyasi. Right? And he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. So one has to still do one's duty. Right? And here, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's famous verse, na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagat ishakamye mama janmani janmanishware bhavatad bhaktir ahetukitva. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, not to enjoy beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. What I want is the causeless mercy of your devotional service in my life, birth after birth. So you will see this purport in this Dhyan Yoga chapter is really beautiful. Okay, I won't have time to cover through all the purports here, but I will strongly suggest that go and read these purports. In these purports, Srila Prabhupada is, although these verses are focusing on Dhyan Yoga, Srila Prabhupada is again and again emphasizing, and that is what Lord Krishna will emphasize in the last verse of this chapter, is that how through devotional service you can achieve these things, what you are trying to do in Dhyan Yoga, and achieve the same result much more easily. Okay? Or I would say simply, much more simply. Easy part, it depends on the person, how humble, how surrendered he is. More surrendered you are, more easy that simple process will be, right? So yam sannyasam iti prahu yogam tam vidhi pandava nahi yashanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Pandu. For one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Right? So here in this verse, Lord Krishna is saying, if you want to follow this Ashtanga Yoga process, then you must, at least in your heart, know that you have to leave sense gratification at some stage when you want to be perfect in this yoga process. That is extremely important for this process. Arurukshor mune yogam karma karanam uchyate yogarudhasya tasyaiva shamah karanam uchyate. Saying Aruruksha means in the beginning, or Arurusya means one who has attained that higher level of yogic stage, right? So those are the two stages. He's saying in the beginning, for one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, that is the Aruruksha stage, work is said to be the means. Right? And for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Right? So when one is in the beginning, one has to engage because he still has those material desires. So see nicely how this verse is connecting to the previous verse where Lord Krishna is saying that he renounces the desire for sense gratification. But can one directly? In the beginning, no, because these are strong attachments. So that's why Lord Krishna is saying in the beginning, one has to engage in work. Okay? But when one is elevated, then one should leave it because now you have purified yourself. You don't want to spoil yourself again. Right? So you have to now remove yourself from those material activities. And here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying how a Krishna conscious person is situated from the beginning itself on the platform of meditation because he's always thinking of Krishna. But yes, whenever we read Srila Prabhupada's purports, we must pay attention to every word he is saying. We just may pay attention to things of Krishna and may forget always. A Krishna conscious person is not a part-time, process. It's a full-time process. So you have to always think of Krishna. Of course, when you go and do your work and office, at that time, you should at least think that I'm doing it so that I can earn money and then I can serve, I can distribute Lord Krishna's message. With that motive, you should go. And so that you don't get unnecessarily engaged in many, side distractions that goes on at work, right? And by being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna, he is considered to have ceased all material activities. Yada hinendriyartheshu na karmashva anusajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yogarudas tadochyate. A person is said to be elevated in yoga, that is the yogaruda stage, having renounced all material desires. Very important, not just material desires, all material desires. So that is when he is said to be elevated in yoga. Then he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Why? Because the seed for those is gone. That's the material desire. It's gone, right? So that is when he says a person is elevated in yoga. Udharet atmanatmanam natmanam avashadayet atmaiva hi atmano bandhu atmaiva ripuratmana. So the use of the word atma here is here what is seen as atma and here what is seen as atma, they are used differently, because atma can, depending on the context, can mean body, it can mean mind, it can also mean the conditioned soul. So here atma is actually mind, and he's saying with mind can become atmano, means conditioned souls, bandhu. Here again, same mind can become enemy of the conditioned soul. Okay. How? One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. Okay. So one has to deliver. How do you deliver? By focusing on things which helps you take away, because you have to, ultimate goal is to take you away from the material activities and material desires, not kill the desires. You still have the desires, but you have spiritual desires. Right? So one has to deliver himself, means one has to make sure you use your mind to focus your senses on things which are spiritual and not material. Because when you do that, material, then you degrade yourself with your mind. Thus, the mind is the friend of the conditioned soul when you deliver yourself with the mind, and his enemy as well when you degrade yourself with the mind by focusing on material activities. Right? And Srila Prabhupada is also quoting that, and this is one of the reasons why Srimad Bhagavad Gita is also called Gita-Upanishad, because many of the verses in the philosophical verses of Srimad Bhagavad Gita are actually taken from various Upanishads. So this one is very similar to taken from Amrita Bindu Upanishad. For man, mind is the cause of bondage and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from the sense objects is the cause of liberation. Right? I just read the English translation of the verse given in the purport. Bandhur atmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jita anatmanastu satrutve vartetatmaiva satruvat. Further, Lord Krishna further goes on explaining, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Right? So, and when we say conquering, the conquering is you can think of it in many ways. It's almost like you're doing a battle. You can also think of it in a relationship between how a mother controls her child gently, right? Um, you can also think of it in ways of you are enticing the mind, like you're telling the mind, hey, better than movie. If I go to the temple on the Sunday, there is a nice dance and kirtan and prasadam. I'll get to talk to many devotees there and have interaction with them. That is much more peaceful. I remember I went last Sunday and it was so nice. Okay, let us go there. So you are sort of enticing the mind then. Gentle way, the way you control mind is when your mind is distracted to something, you don't shut the mind immediately, because that the mind will recoil and try to get it more and more. Instead, you be very gentle, like a mother is to the child. When child wants to do something, then the words mother use to the child is very gentle, right? And he says, no, my son, let us go, we are late. Like, very low tone, very somber tone she uses with the child. So to bring the child under control, like that, you sort of, use that gentle tone with your mind to bring it, you not like shut it down from the attractions. Sometimes you may have to shut it down, right? So there are different ways you can walk with your mind. And that is what meant by conquered. Conquered always doesn't mean that you are fighting a battle, and that also sometimes you may have to do. Okay. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So it's a struggle. It's not easy. It's a struggle. And as we see later in the chapter, that there are appropriate means by which you can achieve that, conquering the mind, Lord Krishna will say. Here is one very interesting thing Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport. I will read it. It's a small purport. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. That is the nature of the living entity. Okay? It actually always follows the order. Now, whose order it is following? That's what Srila Prabhupada will explain. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. So at that time, he is following the order of the mind. But when the mind is conquered, then one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of God, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the mind follows automatically. So this is, Srila Prabhupada is sort of giving you a barometer or a dashboard, whether to know whether you are able to conquer the mind or you are not able to conquer the mind. Whenever you are under the influence of these things, mind has conquered you, right? You are under the control of mind. You have not conquered the mind. When you are doing this, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of personality of Godhead, voluntarily, important keyword there, not out of fear. Okay. Then mind is your friend. So this is sort of a dashboard by which you know that where you are, basically. Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahita shitoshna sukha dukheshu tatha manapamanayo. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. This is another thing I like a lot about Srila Prabhupada's purport, is that he sort of takes the messages from the verses that are going to come to explain, sort of preloading that in the purports. So we sort of, you understand, we can naturally then connect the verses, because sometimes it's very difficult to connect the verses spoken by Lord Krishna, because this is a very high level, right? So we need a guru, like guru or sadhu like Srila Prabhupada, who can help us connect that. So you see here, for one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached. And that is how in the purport, in the previous purport, we saw that he is able to follow his dictations voluntarily, because now he sees a super soul as a person there, a four-arm Vishnu form. He sees that, okay? He has an interaction with that person. And then he has attained tranquility, peace. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. He knows that all that is happening because of, either the external changes going on in the world or because of my past karma. And that is all happening to my subtle body and my gross body. My soul is different from them. He comes to that stage when the mind is conquered. He says, so conquering the mind is actually, it's not a intermediate state. It's a very high stage. Because this is the highest stage. Super soul is already reached as far as the Ashtanga Yogi is concerned, right? Jnana Vijnana Triptatma Kutastho Vijatendriya Yukta Iti Uchate Yogi Samalostrasma Kanchana. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same, right? So he is not reading anything, because the Ashtanga yogis, right, they solely rely on that yogic process to gain that knowledge. Which means if he's not using any external means to gain that knowledge, then where he got that knowledge from? There has to be someone from whom he got that knowledge, because external knowledge is also, if you say books, they are written by someone. So there ultimately is a conscious source. The external knowledge also is a conscious source. But if he's not getting that knowledge from an external source, then where is getting from? That means there is a conscious source within him who is giving him that knowledge. This actually proves that when a yogi is satisfied by that acquired knowledge and realization, this proves that there is someone within the heart which is higher than the soul of yogi who is giving him that knowledge. Right? Such a person is situated in transcendence and self-control. And when that happens, for him the pebbles, stones, or gold, they're all the same. He doesn't see that, because if pebbles and stones are pebbles and stones, they are not really of much worth, materially speaking, right? Gold has some worth, materially speaking, but for a yogi, he knows that even whatever material worth his substance has, with death, everything goes away. He realizes that fact. Ultimately, what remains is the soul and the karma of the soul. That is what follows the soul. That's it. So all these things, it doesn't entice him anymore. All these material distinctions. Suhran mitrari udashina madhyastha dvesha bandhushu sadhusva api cha papeshu shama buddhir vishishyate. A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral mediators, the envious friends and enemies, the pious and the sinners, all with an equal mind. Right? So this is an even more advanced stage, because to think that your friend and your enemy are both same is, in material world, is not that easy. Basically, that's the reason why you're saying he is my friend and he is my enemy, right? There is that emotional thing, there's that feeling. But a yogi in this advanced stage, when he's reaching, this stage, it is a very difficult stage actually, when he sees everyone, the actions they are performing is to his body. And that includes, of course, not just his gross body, but to also his subtle body, his thoughts, which come forth from his intelligence and from his mind, right? Either they're praising or they are, chastising or scolding, abusing, right? That's all happening to that. It's a very advanced stage because it is very hard for the soul, which had been in contact with his gross and subtle body for so many lifetimes, to detach himself. But Lord Krishna is saying there are people who have reached, and therefore Lord Krishna is saying this is an advanced stage. That means there are people who have reached that stage, right? They don't see the distinction. Okay, now I will stop here because till verse 9, Lord Krishna said that how the yogi controls the mind, then what are the different levels of that yogi in the earlier stage, what he is in advanced stage, in the higher stage of realization, what he is, and even more advanced realization, what he is. Now Lord Krishna will go into how the yogi achieves that stage. Okay, so I will stop here, and I'd like to see if there are any questions from anyone, and then I will continue again. Any questions, any feedback? Doesn't have to be questions. You can also give your comments, what opinion, anything on the online. I don't know, I'm not monitoring that. I hope someone is monitoring. Okay, so I will continue. Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi sthita ekaki yata chitatma nirashira parigraha. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. Okay. So this is important. He should not have the feeling of possessiveness. Like Arjuna had that feeling of possessiveness towards his grandfather, towards his guru, right? Towards his, compassion towards humanity at large, right? So he had those possessiveness. So Lord Krishna is saying a transcendentalist has to carefully control his mind. He should stay away from these desires and feelings of possessiveness. And that's why he's supposed to live alone in a secluded place to practice this thing. Now here, Srila Prabhupada is actually saying the other aspect of which is again, the Bhakti Yoga, and how in Krishna consciousness, how we don't remain in seclusion, but our consciousness is secluded. We see the whole world to serve Lord Krishna. That is even more advanced, which is the pinnacle of devotional service. It is actually called Yukta Vairagya, right? You are Yukta, you are connected to the material world, but there is that Vairagya. You know that this does not belong to me, this everything belongs to Lord Krishna. That is even better, that better state. And because we are always have an inclination to act because of soul. When we have body, we have an inclination. That's why you have body, right? A soul has a propensity to act, so it gets a body. But then when he engages the body for Krishna's service, then he develops that vairagya, because he understands that all that he's earning, all that he sees around is actually belongs to Krishna and is to be used for serving Krishna. So he automatically develops that vairagya. Suchau dese pratistapya sthiram ashanam atmana nati utritam nati nicham chailajina kushottaram tatraikagram manah kritva yata chitendriya kriya upavishaya shane yunjat yogam atma vishuddhe. He is now telling the different details of how this has to be practiced. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place, right? And should lay kusa grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and soft cloth. Right? The deer skin is normally kept because normally these are secluded places. Normally, most probably you'll have to go to jungles, which normal materialistic people fear, right? There are wild animals. So you go there, and then when you're sitting on a deer skin tends to repel snakes and vermin and scorpions and all that. They don't come close to deer skin, so they have that smell. The seat should be neither too high nor too low. The same reason, the wild animals can't get to you, and be situated in a sacred place, because sacred place has its own, because this is the concept of association. When you're associating with something sacred, then you will be peaceful, right? So there is a saying in Bengali, dharmotalaye boshe taposya hoy na. Taposya means like penance. You cannot do penance in dharmotala. Dharmotala is actually, if you just go by name, it is not actually a sacred place. Dharmotala is a place in Calcutta, right, where the heavy dose of sense gratification is going on, right? That's a place in Calcutta, all sorts of material opulence you can see there. So the saying says that you cannot be sitting there and then do tapasya, penance, not possible. So you need that sacred place, right? The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. The whole purpose of this seclusion is all those material distractions you're taking away, right? Both physical and mental, right? And you're trying to put yourself in a favorable place so that you can fix the mind on one point. Eka agram, with one attention. What is that one point is Lord Krishna will clarify in the next verse. Samam kaya shiro grivam dharayanna chalam sthira samprekshya nashikagram swam disaschana valokayan prashantatma vigata bhi brahmachari vrate sthita manah shamyam yamachito yukta ashita matparaha. What is Lord Krishna saying? You have to hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line, okay, and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. You should not close your eyes because you may fall asleep. So like a half closed eyes, stare steadily at the tip of the nose. And stare at what? Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, remember your mind is now controlled, conquered, devoid of fear. You should not have any fear because you are doing good. So you'll be protected by the super soul, completely free from sex life, because sex life introduces dirtiness in the mind. So one has to stay away from it. Okay? Your mind also has to be clean. One should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Okay, so Lord Krishna is now clarifying what that one point is. That one point is actually not really a point as in a geometrical point. It means at one object, and that object is Lord Krishna's four-armed form, right? It is clarifying, Srila Prabhupada is clarifying that the goal of life is to know Krishna, who is situated within the heart of every living being as Paramatma, the four-handed Vishnu form. Right? That is what one needs to focus on. And in third canto, 20, I think it is in 28th chapter, third canto, 28th chapter, which is basically Kapila's instructions on the execution of devotional service to his mother, Devahuti. If you guys, if I get time, I will read. I don't think I will get time, but this is a beautiful explanation of how exactly to, in detail it is saying how exactly to focus. A yogi focuses on it. It actually in details tells that you should not focus on all the limbs of Lord Vishnu, in that forearm Lord Vishnu together, but you should go one by one. First, you should for a very long time focus on the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, because that has the power to destroy all the sins, mountains of sins, which is in your consciousness. And then you slowly go to his thighs and hips. Then you go to beautiful navel. Then you go, to his chest, right? And then to his arms, right? Like that. And this is a very beautiful explanation. And then finally, you should spend a lot of time focusing on his smiling face, because that smiling face gives reassurance to a devotee that he is protected, and it also makes the devotee very happy. Just like when you look at, even in material world, when you look at someone who has a smiling face, all your pains automatically go away to a certain extent. If you're going through some distress, right? The smiling face helps a lot, basically. So imagine the smiling face of Supreme Lord, right? So this one actually tells in detail that how that focus should be. What is the order in which you need to focus? I will just read the Vigata V portion, which is the fearless part. One cannot be fearless unless one is fully Krishna conscious. A conditioned soul is fearful due to his perverted memory, his forgetfulness of his eternal relationship with Krishna. The Bhagavatam 11-37 says, Bhayam dvitiya bhiniveshata syad ishat apetasya viparyayo smriti. Krishna consciousness is the only basis for fearlessness. Therefore, perfect practice is possible for a person who is Krishna conscious. And since the ultimate goal of yoga practice is to see the Lord within, a Krishna conscious person is already the best of all yogis. The principles of the yoga system mentioned herein are different from those of popular so-called yoga societies, which is essentially, you do all kinds of things, the sinful activities, and then you do yoga. That will not achieve the ultimate goal of yoga, which is to become Krishna conscious. Okay? And therefore, even though you do yoga, you will still have that fear, because you have not moved away from the bodily conception of life. Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi niyata manasha shantim nirvana paramam mat samstham adhigachyati. Thus, practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God or abode of Krishna by cessation of material existence. So he has to constantly control body, mind, and activities. Okay, it's not just mind, because body kind of, body has influence on the mind, the bodily activities has influence on mind, so you have to control the body also, where it goes, right? Then finally the mystic transcendentalist is mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God by cessation of material existence. Nati ashnastatu yogosti nachan kantam anashnata na chati swapnashilasya jagrato naivacha Arjuna. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi or Arjuna if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. This eating and sleeping has some connection. Like if you eat too much, then what will happen? You will dream more. When you dream more, so if you understand the sleeping cycle, it starts with the stage where you are sort of asleep, not yet, your sleeping has not really started, but it's the process has begun. Then it goes to the dreaming stage. That's when the rapid eye movements happen. And then when the dreaming subsides, you actually go into the sleep, okay, which is called deep sleep. And that is when it is also in Shastras, it is written that when you are in deep sleep, you are actually, touching Brahman. You are sort of in contact with Brahman, your Paramatma, but you are not conscious of that. Is that your Paramatma is asleep, not Paramatma, sorry, Atma is asleep and in contact with Brahman. And therefore, your body is now repairing. So therefore, in the modern medical world also, they want to put you to deep sleep so that both your body and your mind, it gets a chance to heal, right? So you sleep longer because you dream more, so that deep sleep stage goes towards the end. So it gets pushed up. So you sleep longer, you sleep more. Therefore, it's advisable not to eat a lot, right? You should eat balance. If you want to eat more, you should eat in the earlier part of the day, but before sleeping, you should eat little. Okay. So it should be balanced. So the yogi lives a balanced life as a result. Okay. Yuktahara viharasya yukta chetasya karmashu yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukhaha. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. So, as long as you have material pains, you cannot focus your mind on that single point or the single form, that four-round form of Lord Vishnu. You won't, because your mind will go to your material pain. So you have to, in parallel, take care of this as well. You have to engage in some work, some recreation, some sleeping, some eating, right? And if you look at in Krishna conscious, we are automatically regulated because we are having prasadam, so we are satisfied with the food. And then, because we are always thinking, that we have to do service, so we don't sleep a lot, right? Then we are, of course, we engage in a lot of recreation in Krishna consciousness. Like, we have prasadam together with other devotees, we do, sing, kirtan, we dance. So we are engaged in recreation. We also go, to Mayapur annually, although it is kind of, we have not done that for last couple of years, but we annually go to Mayapur or Vrindavan, so we do a lot of tourings to holy places, right? And we do work, of course, we have to work to, earn money and survive. We have to work. So one should be, regulated in these habits, okay, and to mitigate all material pains. Yada viniyatam chittam atmani eva vatisthate nishpriha sarva kamebhyo yukta iti uchyate tada. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga, right? So he disciplines his mental activities, means he is in control of what he is thinking, right? His mind is not in control of what the the soul is supposed to think, but the soul is in control. Okay, then he is situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires. He doesn't have any material desires. Then he is well established in yoga. So all that, remember in the beginning, Lord Krishna was saying in the neophyte stage, he has to engage in activity. In the elevated stage, he's devoid of all material desires. He was talking about various stages in that yogic process, right? In the neophyte stage, it is a little bit elevated. Then he is even more elevated, right? All those different stages. So he is well established in yoga is when he is devoid of all material desires. And again, same thing here, Srila Prabhupada is saying how in Srimad Bhagavatam, how Ambarish Maharaj, because he was engaged in activities dedicated to Lord Krishna, he was, automatically He was doing all kind, like he was mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing of the activities of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the transcendental forms of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell in smelling the scents of lotus flowers offered to the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulsi leaf offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going places to pilgrimage and temple of the Lord, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. He was automatically a pure devotee. His mind was in control. Because a body has to, because a soul inside the body impels the body to act. It needs to engage in activity. So this Ashtanga Yoga process is actually a very difficult process. And in this current Kali Yuga, it is very difficult. It is natural that a body will act. It is very hard to do that self-control because of the external and internal reasons, right? All the anxieties and all the, the goals and tasks we have to do. We are always disturbed. Outside also, there's so much of distractions, right? So instead, we engage in activities which is related to, Lord Krishna. Thus, we keep those activities which is not related to Lord Krishna away. Okay. Yatha dipo nivatastho nengate sopama smrita yogino yatachitasya yunjato yoga matmana. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. And finally, here he is saying, Lord Krishna, in the stage of perfection called trance or Samadhi, right? So in Ashtanga Yoga, there are 8 stages. So there is Yam that you should do, there is Niyam that you should not do. And once you know those things, you practice those things, then you start Asana, which is the posture, yogic postures to, keep your body fit, your joints fit, so that your demands of the body for oxygen is less. Then you go to pranayam, you do the breath control, the breathing exercises, to put the mind under control. And that is when you go to the next stage called pratyahar, where you sort of, take all the senses away from external sense objects to within, basically, right? So that is pratyahar. And then after that, you do dharana. What is that object, that supreme object you need to focus on? So you do dharana of that forearm form. Then you do dhyana, you meditate on that form. The various aspects of that form, the different limbs and the different aspects of that form, the smile of the Lord, the lotus feet of the Lord. So the various aspects of the Lord you do meditate on, dhyana. And then you reach Samadhi, the final stage. And that is what Lord Krishna is explaining. What is that stage? In that stage of perfection called trance or Samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to release and rejoice in the self. In the joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. So this is important. His senses are no more material senses. His senses are transcendental. Okay? Transcendental means he still sees the material world, but his senses sees them as objects to be served to Krishna, not for his enjoyment. Right? It's no more material. It has become transcendental. Established thus, one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain, because being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Right? Greatest difficulty, right? Even in the greatest difficulty, which is one of them is like death, he is not shaken, because he knows that what is going away is my body. My soul is still there, and my super soul will take care of this soul and put in the body where I'm supposed to go based on my past, actions, or where he wants me to serve next. So he is not disturbed, right? Because he has reached that transcendental stage. He knows the relationship that what he is a soul, eternal soul, and his job is to, serve the super soul. He understands that relationship basically between the soul and super soul. Not only understands, but he realizes that he actually sees the super soul everywhere, how super soul is controlling the whole world and controlling him also, basically. Right? And Yoga Sutra, which is written by Patanjali, is actually does talk a lot about this Ashtanga Yoga. And there, in this Samadhi stage, he is actually talking about, that bliss aspect, the bliss aspect of Samadhi, which, the modern, yoga authors and all, they don't, for some reason, they don't like happiness. Okay. They don't like bliss or happiness. They simply want to merge, individual soul merge with the super soul. But that aspect of bliss, which comes from the relationship, and then that relationship then fructifies into activities taking place between soul and super soul. That bliss is described in Yoga Sutra. That is what Srila Prabhupada is writing here. This is a nice purport, this last paragraph of this verse. I will read it. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a person who is in pure Bhakti Yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. So this is the thing. He is still meeting the demands of the body, a Krishna conscious person, the person in Bhakti Yoga, but he is not arousing the senses. So thus he is not getting bound, by his activities. That bondage to action is not there. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous towards incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Agama Paino Nityastam Stitikshava Bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. So, Srila Prabhupada is saying that in this, what that perfection is so hardly achieved so hard to achieve in the Ashtanga yoga practice, a Krishna conscious person automatically achieves that, because he has that conception of life that, everything that is happening to me is because of my past karma, and it will go away. Basically, as my karma burns, it will go away. So I have to keep doing my duty. That is to serve Lord Krishna through my work, through my worship, by, associating with other devotees, distributing his messages to the others. So he keeps himself busy in those duties, and all those incidental occurrences happen, but he doesn't pay much attention to them. Basically, it's sort of the right word to use is callous, basically, towards those. Which is actually, you will see a materialist when the materialist, when they see the devotees, they sometimes become very angry at them, because the reason why they become angry is because they themselves cannot achieve this tendency. Because they know if they achieve this tendency, all the problem will be solved, but they cannot. And they are not ready to accept Krishna consciousness. But that is the only way you can achieve this callousness towards incidental occurrences. Because that is when you will know everything is working perfectly under the control of Super Soul. Sa nischayena yoktavyo yogo nirvinna chetasa sankalpa prabhavan kamans tyaktva sarvan asheshata manashai vendriya gramam viniyamya shamantata. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith. Lord Krishna is again coming back to the practice of yoga, that to achieve that samadhi, how one is to, go about doing it. Determination and faith, right? They kind of go together. As long as you have faith, you will have determination, right? And more determined you are, better faith you will develop, right? And not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. So this practice of yoga is not a very easy practice, but that is what Lord Krishna is saying, that in this path one has to engage in these sorts of to say, the nuances of this practice. One has to follow these requirements, not nuances, but these requirements of this path. And Srila Prabhupada is giving a nice example about this determination, how once an ocean takes away the eggs from a sparrow, and then, the sparrow first tells ocean, please return my eggs. And the ocean says, I won't return. Who are you? Like, why should I listen to you? Like a little sparrow, right? And then he says, then I will dry up the ocean. And then ocean laughs at him, but still it doesn't, waver from a determination, and through which using a small beak start picking out the water. Then when Garuda, the devotee of the Lord, comes and sees that his small sister bird is engaged with determination, then Garuda says to ocean that if you don't, return her eggs, then I will start helping the sparrow. And then ocean gets frightened and they return the eggs. So even though your effort may seem very meager in the beginning, but if you're determined, help will come, and one should be humble to accept those helps. And then, move ahead, devotional service, right? Sanay sanar uparame buddhya dhriti grihitaya atma shamstam mana kritva na kinchedapi chintaet. Gradually, step by step. So this yogic process, one has to go step by step, right? That is why it says Ashtanga Yoga, as I explained just now before, this whole 8-step process: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi, like that, step by step. Situated, one should become situated in trance, that is Samadhi, by means of intelligence, sustained by full conviction, right? This intelligence is not the material intelligence. This is spiritual intelligence, which Lord Krishna talked about at the end of 3rd chapter and elaborated on the 4th chapter. Right? That intelligence. One has to have firm conviction. And thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Right? Yato yato nischalati manaschanchalam astiram tatastato niyamaye tad atmani eva vasham nayet. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Right? So one has to bring it back. Okay, it will go. It will keep. In the beginning, it will go away, to all the material things. It will get distracted, but one has to bring it back to the self and the super self, which is the super soul. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. Sorry, I did not read the verse. Prashanta manasham hinam yoginam shukham uttamam upeti shanta rajasham brahma bhutam akalmasham. So brahma bhuta stage the yogi attains when his mind is fixed on me, means Lord Krishna verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. Lord Krishna means in his four-arm form. Is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme. He understands that, the qualities he has as a soul actually came from that Supreme Soul. Okay, he realizes that fact, and thus he is freed from all reactions to his past states. So when he realizes that, then that reaction to his past states goes away, it burns away. Okay. Yunjan evam shadatmanam yogi vigata kalmasha shukhena brahma sangsparsham atyantam shukham asnute. Thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. So that is the thing he achieves, and that is highest stage of perfect happiness. Why? Because the soul wants happiness. One, soul also wants to engage in activities. These are two essential nature of soul. Now, when he is not focused on Lord Krishna, then he is focused on Krishna's energy. Right? And when he's focused on Krishna's energy, which is always changing, so his happiness is always changing. And he does not like that. Right? He has to engage in activity, he engages in material activities. Right? So his happiness is changing all the time. He gets some happiness, but the happiness goes away. He tries to do something else, he gets some happiness, and again it goes away, like that. So, but when he focuses on Lord Krishna and engages in transcendental loving service, means seva, he does that seva, the devotional service to the Lord, then he's engaged in activity, and because Lord is eternal, not changing, right? And therefore his happiness is also eternal. So he gets both. Okay, he gets activities and he also gets happiness, and therefore that happiness is called a highest stage of perfect happiness. Sarvabhutastam atmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra shamadarshana. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. Okay. So he comes to that stage where he sees super soul is in heart of every living being, just like it is in heart of his body, right? And he sees he is directing them as per their desires, what they want. Right? And I'm going to read the last paragraph of this purport, which is very interesting. Srila Prabhupada wrote, the yogi sees equally because he sees that all living entities, although in different situations according to the results of fruitive work, in all circumstances remain the servants of God. It is not that he who has realized it, he is servant of God. Everyone, even the materialist people, they are also servant of God. How? While in the material energy, the living entity serves the material senses, and while in the spiritual energy, he serves the Supreme Lord directly. In either case, living entity is the servant of God. This vision of equality is a perfect in a person in Krishna consciousness. So a Krishna conscious person, he realizes this fact that if someone is a materialist, he is also serving, but he is serving the changing energy of the Lord, which changes, transforms the Prakriti, right? When he is serving the Lord, then he is serving the spiritual energy of the Lord. So he is always serving, he is always a servant. But when he is a servant of the God directly, is spiritual, the servant of the spiritual energy of the Lord, then he gets the happiness. I mean, the perfect happiness, the highest stage of perfect happiness. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sa cha me na pranashyati. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Now that condition of where he sees Lord everywhere in every living entity, is that lost? Lord Krishna is saying, no, it is never lost. Once you reach that stage, it is never lost. Okay. Sarvabhuta sthitam yo mam bhajati ekatvam asthita sarvatha vartamanopi sa yogi mai vartate. Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and the super soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. Okay, in all circumstances. This is a very important word. In any circumstance, he always remains in Lord Krishna. Is always under the protection of Lord Krishna. But for that, of course, he always has to be in this conception that Lord Krishna and super soul are one and the same. They are not different, right? And therefore is engaged in worshipful service of the super soul. Atma upamyena sarvatra sanam pashyati yo arjuna sukham va yadi vadukam sa yogi paramo matah. He is a perfect yogi who by comparison to his own self sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress. O Arjuna, is the same thing what we were talking before, right? He sees that they are happy because of his past karma, distress also because of his past karma. He doesn't get disturbed. Okay, it is all super soul ultimately is sanctioning, the next life, the happenings in the current life of the various living entities. So he is not disturbed. Arjuna Uvacha, although he is not disturbed, I will add, if he sees that he is too much distressed, that person, then he does go and tell them. He gives that message, this whatever he has realized, he shares that realization. So it helps that person being, more peaceful, okay, and able to tolerate, how to tolerate that distress is going through, or how to even alleviate. If he serves the Lord, he and does devotional service, then ultimately everything, all this is happening because of the sanction from the super soul, who is an expansion of Lord Krishna. And if he serves and he is merciful, and out of his causeless mercy, he may even reduce his reactions, his sins. And he gives that message to this distressed soul. Arjuna uvacha yoyam yogas tvaya prokta shamyena madhusudana etasyaham na pashyami chanchalatvat sthitim sthiram. Arjuna said, O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. Here I will say something. To hear this thing only, to hear this thing from Arjuna, is Lord Krishna was talking so much about this Dhyan Yoga. Because if you remember in first chapter, Arjuna said that I want all these people to be alive and I don't want this kingdom. So I will go and I will, spend the rest of my life begging. So he was trying to take sannyas. And this is another reason why Lord Krishna started with that distinction, in the second chapter of between soul and body, like the Sankhya and then Buddhi Yoga, how to apply that, the business of soul, right? How to apply the intelligence in the business of soul, right? And then in third chapter, he talks about Karma Yoga, he goes to Gyan Yoga, and now to Dhyan Yoga. The reason why Lord Krishna is saying all this to Arjuna is Arjuna saying, don't think that sannyasi means just going and begging and filling your belly. No, this is what sannyasis do. This is what sannyasis do. They actively control their mind. They go to a sacred place and all. So you have to, if you want to take that path, you have to do this also. You cannot just pretend to be a sannyasi. You have to do that duty. Either you do your natural duty, which is you are a Kshatriya. Okay, so do that. Or if you want to do that, then you have to do all this. Now Arjuna is saying the system of yoga you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. So Arjuna is saying that. So Arjuna admits now that path is also not very, if I was thinking of taking that path, looks like it is more difficult than my current job, basically. The grass is greener always on the other side, right? We have heard that, saying, right? Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayo nivashu dushkaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So now Arjuna is saying, what is the problem? Why he cannot do it? Is because of the mind, which has these characteristics. Right? And again, here Srila Prabhupada is saying how instead of doing Ashtanga Yoga, which is so difficult for a modern man, right? Arjuna had much better facilities, and for a modern man, it is no way. And Arjuna was saying he cannot do it. So what to speak of the modern man, right? So it is better that you engage in activity and then offer that results of that activity to Krishna. And that's how you serve him. That is a better way to engage and to stay away from the agitations of mind. Sri Bhagavan Vacha Ashamshayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyashena tu Kaunteya Vairagyana Chagrihate. Lord Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice by detachment. Lord Krishna is saying, simply because you cannot do it, that does not mean no one can do it. And there are no ways of doing it. So by suitable practice and by detachment, it can be done, right? It can be done. That is what Lord Krishna is saying, right? Maybe you cannot because that is not in your nature. You are a Kshatriya, okay? But someone who is more like a Brahmana nature, probably he can do, right? Of course, Arjuna was a transcendental person. He was a devotee. But Lord Krishna, through his Yoga Maya, has put Arjuna in this situation. His subtle mind and intelligence has put him in this situation to ask these questions. So it clarifies for lesser souls, that how they should behave. Okay. So we have to understand that. The Arjuna, when we say Arjuna here Arjuna is actually under the influence of Yoga Maya of Lord Krishna, where he is talking like a common man, but he's actually a elevated devotee. So this is one of the things we have to understand, that when you are a devotee of Krishna, he may sometimes use you as a puppet like this. Okay, so you need to develop that humility. It's not so easy to become a devotee of Lord Krishna. Asamyatatmana yogo dushprapa iti me mati vashyatmana tu yatata shakyo vaptum upayata. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work, but he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. So it is Lord Krishna's opinion, it's the final opinion. So that means it is possible, but you have to do it by appropriate means. Okay. A Krishna conscious person achieves the result of yoga practice without separate endeavor. But a yoga practitioner cannot achieve success without becoming Krishna conscious. A Krishna conscious person is having Krishna consciousness, is also getting the result of yoga practice. But yoga practitioner, apart from his regular practice, has to become Krishna conscious also. Then only he will get the success. Because at the end, in not only devotees, even the materialists also, the result is actually coming because of mercy. They are just under illusion that they're thinking the result is coming because of their hard work. It's just their illusion. Hard work is also one of the factors, but mercy from the super soul is also a very, very big factor of the success. And same is true for the yoga practitioner also. Arjuna uvacha ayati shraddha yopete yoga chalita manasha aprapya yoga samsiddhim kam gatim Krishna gacchati. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? Because Maya is very strong. So it is possible not only the material allurements, but even the siddhis you get. There are 18 siddhis as stored in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, right? So those siddhis you get, they can also distract you. That's not the real goal, as Lord Krishna was saying before, of yoga. It is to be in trance and to remain in that relationship with the super soul, the soul and relationship with the super soul, and perform the transcendental service. That's the ultimate goal of yoga. So Arjuna is asking, so what happens to such a person who gets distracted, right, from the path of yoga? Kachino bhaya bibrasta chinnabhram eva nashyati apratistho mahabaho viru vimuro brahmanapati. O mighty Am Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere, right? This can be a natural question, because a materialist is looking at, he left all the material happiness and he's in a jungle and he is now lost. So what did he get finally in life, right? So Arjuna is asking that on behalf of a materialistic person, he's asking that question to Lord Krishna. Etanma samsayam Krishna chetum arhasi asheshata tvat anya samshaya yasya chetana hi upapadyate. This is my doubt, O Krishna. I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. Why? Because he knows, like Lord Krishna is saying in 4th chapter, that Arjuna, you have taken, just like you have taken births, I also came to this world many times. I remember all of them, but you cannot. So he remembers not only his, but everyone's life. So therefore he can say what happens to such persons. That is why Arjuna asked these questions to Lord Krishna. Sri Bhagavan Vacha Parthaneveha Namutra Vinashastasya Vidyate Nahi Kalyana Kritkasche Durgatim Tata Gachati. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. Here in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is actually talking about that, the various types of yoga and how they are divided, the eightfold yoga system. It's a lot of details. Prapya punya kritam lokan ushitva shashwati sama suchinam srimatam gehe yoga bhrashto abhijayate. The unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy, right? So he's not lost. He gets another chance, okay? Or if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly such a birth is rare in this world. So therefore, it is good that, like Srila Prabhupada used to say, that try to go back to Godhead in this life itself. Take devotional service seriously. It is a simple process, may not be easy, but with good association, it can become easy. Take it seriously and go back to Godhead in this life itself. Okay? Don't take chances. That is why, because you see, even if you do unsuccessful in this long practice of yoga, this birth itself is rare. Maybe he has to wait in his subtle body, right? Tatra tam buddhi samyogam labate parva dehikam yatate cha tato bhuya samsiddhau kuru nandana. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. So he continues, he naturally goes, it's attracted. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted. Purvabhyasena tenaiva hriyate hi avasopisa jigyashurapi yogasya shabda brahmati vartate. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. He gets attracted. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of scripture. So such a person is not attracted to the material activities, is also not that much attracted to the religious activities, but is attracted to the spiritual activities. He automatically is attracted. That's what Lord Krishna is saying. Prayatnad yata manastu yogisham shuddhu kilbisha aneka janma shamsiddhas tato yati param gatim. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed off all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. So that is the thing, many, many births of practice. Okay, so that is the bahunam janmanam ante, right? So it takes many births. So it is actually a risky process, but Lord Krishna is saying that this is also a process, and the sannyasis who go to the forest, they don't simply beg, but they engage in that risky path. Okay. Tapashvibhyo adhiko yogi jnanibhyo api matodhika karmabhyas chadhiko yogi tashmat yogi bhavarjuna. A yogi is greater than ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. Right? What he's trying to say is that be in that mental state of yogi. Okay, not to do the yoga, and it will become clear in the next verse, which is the last verse. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantara atmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam shame yukta tamo mata. And of all yogis, one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me. So this is the bhajate, seva. He's doing seva, not just mechanical yogic postures and pranayam. He's doing seva to the Lord. So he is actually talking about bhakti yoga, devotional service. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all, means highest of all. That is my opinion. So case closed, right? That is Lord Krishna's opinion, who is the supreme, who knows everything. And he is saying this is the best of, that person is the best of, all the yogis. So I will now stop and take any, final comments, feedback, reflection from anyone here, or any comments online. I don't know.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you so much for covering the entire 6th chapter. It was very, very nice, very nicely covered, and a lot of doubts, or there was so much clarity, and there was so much clarification on many doubts that were lingering in the mind as you were covering these verses. Thank you so much for connecting Arjuna's situation and telling that this entire chapter was started off by Krishna because of Arjuna's initial endeavor to actually renounce and go to the forest. And finally, Arjuna admits that it is very difficult to actually control the mind. So that was a very nice, take for me.
And he actually tells in the end that
path
you are in is the better path.
Better path, yeah. I thought that was so beautiful. The last verse, it just culminates in what we have to do, keeping Arjuna on the front. I mean, using Arjuna as an example, he just uncovers this entire Dhyana Yoga. So thank you so much, Prabhu. Very, very nicely covered. Thank you so much for the wonderful class.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your observations and feedback. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, we'll close the session here if no one has any other comments.
Sure, Prabhu. So thank you so much, and thanks for everyone who joined. So looking forward to another session very soon from you, Prabhu.
Okay.
We can end the call here.
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhupada ki jai, Ashyra Madhav Prabhu ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai, Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.